Brain Scratchers. It's me again, John Lorden, back with another edition of Brain Scratch.
I haven't seen that intro in a while. Happy Friday, everyone. Welcome to a new old episode of Brain Scratch. I'm John Lorden. Thank you so much for joining me here today. Every now and then, it seems like once or twice a year, I get an itch to kind of go back to our roots. And for those of you that weren't around, Brain Scratch originally started looking into hard to explain mysteries, urban legends, things of that nature. And we kind of grew away from that once we found that we could be a little more helpful in terms of trying to raise exposure to the true crime cases. But every now and then I get a little itch to do one of those old style cases. So that's what we're going to do here today. Interestingly, this story came to me at CrimeCon. This very nice lady came up and she asked if I had ever heard of the Eyes of Saint Joseph. Now, I can't quite remember if she was directly related or if she just knew someone, but she told me a couple names. I jotted those down in a notebook, and today I came across those notes and found myself just plummeting down a rabbit hole. So I want to share that with you guys. Let's take a look at this together and see if we can figure out, is this an urban legend? Is this a matter of public perception? Did someone lose their life around this? Was that a real person? Was that just part of the folklore around all this? Let's go ahead and dive in together, starting at Wikipedia to find out where this is going on. Jersey City, New Jersey. Jersey City is the second most populous city in the U.S. state of New Jersey after Newark. The 2020 United States Census showed that the city's population was 292,000 people, ranking as the 71st most populous incorporated place in the nation. A lot of people there. Part of the New York metropolitan area, Jersey City is bounded on the east by the Hudson River and Upper New York Bay, and on the west by the Hackensack River and Newark Bay. Redevelopment of the Jersey City waterfront has made the city one of the largest centers of banking and finance in the United States. I didn't know anything about this. It's actually led to that district and city being nicknamed Wall Street West. Well, what about this urban legend? Starting at, I guess it's Movoto.com, 53 things you probably didn't know about Jersey City. Just kind of a quick punch list of odds and ends. The Statue of Liberty is actually inside Jersey City. In the 1950s, rock and roll was banned in Jersey City by Commissioner Lawrence Whipple. What a square, it notes here. But down here at number 16, Jersey City has its share of spooky residents too. At night, at St. Joseph's Church, urban legend holds that you can see two eyes in the tower, also known as Cat's Eyes of St. Joseph. I've only seen the cat's eyes reference in a few places, but when you see the shape of what they're talking about, I mean, it certainly makes sense. To kind of understand the folklore aspect of this a little more, I found this looks like it's a high school project. I think it was from back in 2010. Some students at a local school called Dickinson's were putting together kind of a video project. But from what I can see, this is not a fictionalized. This is basically just stories that they had heard about their town. And there is a segment on this in there. So let's just take a look a little bit at kind of some of the stories that are being kicked around about this.
I used to go to parochial school there, and the story was that the priest had went to the tower and he told the nuns that he was going to go work, and he never came down, so the nuns had went upstairs to the tower and they found him dead with blood everywhere, and ever since then they saw like the eyes appear from St. Joseph's Tower.
According to local lore, a priest hung himself on the belfry tower of St. Joseph's Church. So a lot of people claim to see two eyes emanating from its from the tower itself at nighttime.
Did someone really lose their life up there? Is this image unaltered? I mean, just taking a quick look at this image, it's pretty interesting how strong these lights are. My first inclination is there's some type of light source in this building that's creating those. Thankfully, we'll have some other images to look at by the end of this video that'll give us a little bit more to look at in terms of detail. We can see this is a pretty grainy and older shot. But let's just stop at Reddit real quick for a comment from here, just from 10 months ago by Ruben Sinclair. I just heard about this from my neighbor who has lived near there at this time. He said that traffic was insane for months as people descended on the area to see it for themselves. And the priest who served in the church at the time was who everyone suspected was responsible for it. So kind of getting these stories from all different angles here, just in terms of the spoken story around this. Let's take a look at Mysterious Universe. This is a source we used to bring up all the time on Brain Scratch back when we started. It's been a while since we've stopped by, but thankful to see they're still here. The Ghostly Eyes of St. Joseph's Church, still unsolved a century later. This was written in August of 2021, so obviously we can see people still talking about it, still trying to hash this out. The mysterious lights have been seen from the church's belfry over the last 100 years, and nobody can come up with a definitive explanation as to what's causing them. First witnessed in July of 1921, the lights were in the shape of half moons and were described as glowing pale in color, and occasionally they had a bloody red streak across them. Now, when I originally started reading these descriptions, we're going to see a lot of mention about that bloody red streak in these kind of newer versions of the story. But I did find one newspaper article, actually a picture of a newspaper article. I can't confirm if it's real or not. But that's where this term bloody red streak is coming from. I don't know how blood gets in there. I mean, if there's a red streak in the light, there's a red streak in the light. What makes it bloody? I have no idea, except for, potentially people trying to make a headline that'll sell a newspaper. But we'll get better descriptions from reliable news sources about what the light was like. Basically, that's one of the challenges for me today. I'm trying to figure out, can we get enough detail to understand the pattern, the frequency of the lights, because that information might help us come to understand what's actually causing it. And is there a real victim in this? Was there really a priest that died up there? And of course, it would be great to just have this thing solved by the end of today's video, right? And just say, hey, I think we figured it out. Will we get that close? Typically with these types of stories, we don't get quite that close, but who knows? Maybe this will be the one. So we have the lights start in 1921, and then the lights seem to have stopped for a while until they mysteriously reappeared on Good Friday in 1954. Good Friday in 1954 would have been April 16th. And for anyone that doesn't know, Good Friday is the Friday before Easter, on which the crucifixion of Jesus Christ is commemorated in the Christian church, traditionally a day of fasting and penance. So let's continue here. The lights were witnessed by children who were playing nearby, and once word spread of the sighting, locals claimed that it was a miracle. Priests have attempted everything they could to try and explain the lights, such as putting flour on the floor to capture someone's footprints, but nothing showed up and the lights continued. Kind of an interesting approach, but at least based on that one picture that we've seen so far, I mean, my first feeling is someone's in there. This is, you can see it's pretty dark outside. Everything else is dark in this photo. I'm pretty sure just one good lamp being in that room could cause this type of lighting. There's a little hang up on that, which we'll talk about a little more as we see some better pictures. But essentially, there's a third window over here. So if there was a light source in this room, why are we only seeing 2 of these windows light up? There should actually be 3, because there's a third window that faces this direction as well. It was believed that the lights were coming from inside of the church, so they theorized that it could be a reflection from something outside. However, they again couldn't find a concrete explanation. While some locals thought that the eyes were caused by phosphorus gases or even traffic lights, others were convinced that they were supernatural. I don't know how many traffic lights would have been around during the original occurrence. Of course, if we're talking about Good Friday in 1954, is there going to be traffic lights and street lights in this area by then? I would definitely. But the original occurrences back in 1921, 101 years ago, I don't know. It's impossible to know when the lights will show up, as they can appear at any time. Those who walk by St. Joseph's Church still look up, wondering if they will catch a glimpse of the mysterious eyes that have baffled locals for the last century. St. Joseph's, still in operation, is a church and also a school. It was founded as a mission in 1856. It's one of Jersey City's oldest parishes, 165 years in the journey of faith. And they have a website too. There's just not a whole lot of information there. I mean, honestly, I had to go to the Facebook page just to find out how long they've been there. The website is just super, super bare bones. We have an archived article here from 2006, and it's really talking about Halloween events that are coming up in the area, but then it mentions this story, kind of wraps that in as one of the things that you might want to do in town. The Eyes of St. Joseph, a phenomenon dating back to 1921, has been written about in the publication Weird New Jersey, as well as the St. Joseph's Church website, and by local storyteller Bob Leach. The church website, there's no information about it there currently. Like I mentioned, the website's completely bare bones at this point. Bob Leach is someone we're going to lean on in a little bit. He's kind of a local historian. I guess he doesn't like the term historian because he really is a storyteller. We'll see a little bit of his work by the end of this video. But thankfully, he cared enough about this topic to really kind of dig deep in terms of the research. He was able to find articles at the local library there that I cannot find available online. I found my own share. We've got plenty of articles to look at, but he had some different sources for his information. He really stops. He just stops short of even kind of giving his own idea of what's going on with it. But he tells the story very, very well. And one of the things I really appreciate about it is he spends some time when he's telling the story actually talking about what it was like to be a kid during that time. I mean, he was alive when this was going on. And, you know, you have the Iron Curtain situation just starting, something that a lot of us are thinking about nowadays, certainly with everything that's been happening lately. You have kids being worried now because there's new weapons that are being talked about by our military as well. And, you know, kids have to learn about duck and cover in school. There was just a big, I think he really wants to point out that people were looking for hope in some way. And maybe this was one of those things that would draw people together. And it seems like it did, but let's continue here. They are an eerie pair of lighted eyes spotted coming from the church's steeple that supposedly can be seen at sporadic occasions if standing on the corner of Newark and Baldwin. I've heard actually two different explanations about where you could be standing for this, but Newark and Baldwin is just about a block away. Here's St. Joseph's Church, and Newark and Baldwin right here, a little more than a block from honestly, St. Joseph, they own this property up to here. So it's literally exactly 1 block away. Some other articles that I have to question a little bit just because we don't know where they came from. Someone basically found them in like letters from their mother. We'll get to all that. But in those articles, they're saying that people were trying to view it from Henry Street and Baldwin. Now, as of current maps, Henry does not connect to Baldwin, and you can see it's on the flip side. It's still about the same distance away, but on the flip side of the church. For some of the theories, that might be important to know which side that we're looking at, but that's why I just wanted to point it out. Most of the things I'm seeing are saying that it was this other corner of Newark and Baldwin. According to the St. Joseph Church website, the legend of the lights grew when a church sexton, Matthew Guarino, went to investigate the lights in the church's belfry, only to be found dead in the belfry the next day. I'm wondering if the church sexton, which is basically like someone that's responsible for keeping up the grounds, keeping up the maintenance on the building, things like that. I'm wondering if this story about Matthew Guarino is what turned into that story that it seems like the teacher was telling in the high school clip that we watched. Just seems kind of similar. We've got someone that goes up there and essentially they find him dead. We don't know cause of death. And honestly, at this point, we don't even know if this Matthew Guarino is necessarily a real person or is this part of the folklore. Of course, that's one of our challenges for today's video, but let's continue. Do people still believe in the eyes in the present time? That depends on who you ask. A young man who has worked in the neighborhood for over 10 years says he had heard all the stories, but was always skeptical until one night. Quote, I was walking down Baldwin Avenue coming from the Heights. I was standing near McDonald's on Newark Avenue when I looked up and the lights were there, said the man, who asked to be anonymous. Wow, now I know what they're talking about all these years. Reverend James Peñota, pastor of St. Joseph Church, said last week, in his 34 years at the church, he has heard all the stories, but they have not swayed him. I have some people in my church who believe very strongly, and for them, it's real, he said. I had one do an email with me back and forth on this matter, and I had to give up. Peñota added, for me, it's amusing, it's a little local culture, it's like believing in Santa Claus. So we have someone that has worked at that church for over 3 decades, and he's talking about this like it's purely just a folklore story, like there's nothing to the reality of it at all. Of course, we also have this young man that says he goes to McDonald's, he looks up and he sees it, and we've got several other publications writing about it. Can we actually prove if it's happening up here or not? Let's take a look. So this is standing at the corner of Newark and Baldwin. We can see that right here. I wonder if we can find this McDonald's that they're talking about. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not seeing this McDonald's. However, this is the church in this direction. And we can see the steeple up here. And here are the 3 windows. Remember I mentioned there was 3 windows, and for some reason we're only seeing lights in 2 of them. Thinking about the possibility that this is happening from some outside source or something, you know, that could be helpful, just seeing like the shape, seeing the direction of the lights, because maybe that would give us some clue as to, oh, there's got to be a light source over in this direction. Is there something that's a significant light source at night in this particular direction? We'll get to the pictures where we can kind of take a better look at that. But this is essentially the view where you will see those eyes just only at certain times. We have a newspaper clipping here. I don't know from what paper, but once again, this might even be the same image that we saw in the high school video. And I'm almost wondering, I don't know if newspapers were doing any form of touch-up back in the 1950s. It's just these are super, super bold, these colors. And here we get almost, it looks like there's a front door as well that's lit up. If this hasn't been retouched, what's really interesting to me is the amount of light that's coming through this doorway. Like you can see how it's kind of holding its shape. It seems to be the same amount of light that's coming out from up here as well. Obviously, the shape of these windows are a little different. They are built almost as, I mean, you can consider them half moons, but it's half a circle, and you can see the bottom's kind of cut off and it has a notch in it. I mean, I suppose that could just be the whole window completely lit up, and then if there was enough light, it would kind of bleed out on the bottom, but the shape just looks a little different. Like the door shape looks right. The window shape looks like something's off. Despite the fact that you have this current reverend saying he thinks it's like believing in Santa Claus, here we do have a clip from a newspaper, and we can see there's a headline talking about this occurrence, and the fact that 20,000 people have gathered there trying to see this. I think the number might be exaggerated, but let's dive into some of the details on the articles I could find here and see if we could figure this out. Basically, for the articles I could find, they start on May 17th. They really run strong just May 17th and May 18th, and I don't see a whole lot outside of that. I'm curious why that is nearly a month after the initial sighting. The initial sighting is April 16th. Maybe it just took a certain amount of time for word to spread around town about this. I also wonder if there's something else maybe culturally or in the community that's happening around that time that kind of pulls people back to this. But we see here on this article from the Courier News, Belfry lights, cause found. Well, looks like this video might be shorter than expected, or will it? Let's go ahead and see what some of the details are on that. Quote, I wish it was a true apparition of the Almighty, come back to bid us peace and goodwill, said the parish priest, but there are no grounds for that theory. The priest, who declined use of his name, said the varicolored lights are reflections from the corner traffic light. There's nothing to it, he said, of reports of some kind of supernatural happening. I wish there was. But despite the priest's everyday explanation, the people came to see for themselves. Jersey City police sent an emergency squad down to handle the milling crowd of curious last night. So this becomes enough of an issue that law enforcement's actually going there to try, basically for crowd control around this church. We have a priest there. He's not putting his name on it, but he's basically saying, hey guys, I think this is just a reflection off a traffic light. Definitely put that in the list of considerations. Continuing at Asbury Park Press on the same day, May 17th, 1954. On Saturday night, some 800 persons gathered near the church. Police Sergeant James Braddis has said that some of them reported they heard organ music. I don't know if that would exactly be supernatural. It's a Saturday night. You're close to a church. Quote, people seek the supernatural instead of looking for the natural causes, the priest said. It's the same priest, the same unnamed one from the last article, as he gave his explanation of the white, amber, pink, and yellow lights that appeared at intervals in the tower windows. So now we're getting a little more. We have multiple colors supposedly coming from this. And is that lining up with an explanation of a traffic light? I mean, is that what he said? Yeah, I mean, he says a corner traffic light. So is he thinking that just with the, going from red to green to yellow to red, that those colors flipping through are actually affecting the eyes in some way? Appearing at intervals is curious. We got to see if we can find some more information on the timing of those intervals. I mean, if it's, every 1 to 2 minutes, the color changes and only stays yellow for a few seconds and then it turns red. And then he's not mentioning green, but it could be pretty easy to explain that away. Although, things are never that easy on this show. Continuing to the morning call, still from the 17th of May, 1954. The lights, flickering nightly for the past 3 weeks, indirectly brought death to the church sexton Matthew Guarino, 64. He was found dead Friday in the loft where the lights had been seen. Police said he apparently suffered a heart attack hours before as he sought to trace the source of the nightly glow. So I think this is giving us some insight into why these articles are really popped heavy on these two particular days. This weekend seems to become a particular focus for what's happening here. It's because his body is found on Friday. The lights have appeared in 2 tower windows at intervals of 10 to 12 minutes. They take on an almost white appearance and then change to amber, pink, and finally a dull yellow. I mean, as far as I know, I think traffic lights, I'm pretty sure they have green. So I don't know why we're not seeing that as a color. And quite honestly, the colors that they're talking about, amber, pink, kind of dull yellow, that almost makes me think more of like a flame source for being the light. But that would be more of a flicker. And they're really talking about this in a way where it's kind of like flipping through these colors. But the intervals of 10 to 12 minutes for a traffic light, I don't know about that one. One theory is that the glow is a reflection of traffic lights in the northwest corner. Now that's interesting. If we're thinking about multiple traffic lights and they're on some type of static timer, like maybe you've got the ones that are close and they're flipping every 3 minutes and the ones that are farther out are flipping every 5 or something, then you might have 2 different light sources that in combination, like, for 1 minute, this one's green, but this one is red. The combo of those colors reflecting up there somehow, which is another whole conversation we're going to get to. Like, how does that light bounce around and then come back out that direction where someone standing on the ground is looking up and is able to see it? We'll talk about that. But there is something to that. Perhaps a combination of the traffic lights, maybe with street lights as well. Maybe there's some business on the other side that has some bright, logo lit up or something. A combo of things might be at play here. And honestly, even for these different accounts, I mean, this boils down to people are telling the story of what they're seeing with these lights. Is it possible that there's different sources that these people are seeing? Maybe that's why we have kind of two different locations noted, depending on the articles that you read. If it's reflective enough up there, could it be that a different light source from north would be seen when you're standing on the south end, and then vice versa? Just another possibility. Maybe it is a combination of things. The parish priest said he believed the changing traffic signals produced the changing colors in the Belfry Tower. There are so many lights and so many reflections, he said. I wish they would cut down my electric light bills. This guy. Kind of interesting to me that you would have the parish priest not kind of embrace this as something special. I mean, I guess it's becoming a nuisance for the town is really the problem. You've got hundreds, and then that turns into thousands of people that are coming out to try to see this. But you know, we've heard of other occurrences where, you know, like the Virgin Mary will be seen in a rock formation where there's some water pouring through, or a crucifix will start bleeding and things like that. And people go out in droves to pray around that. So it's really interesting to me that we have the priest just kind of like, no, it's traffic lights. You know, I wish this was a miracle of some kind, but it's traffic lights. Very, very interesting angle on that. All right, so let's get to the 18th of May, 1954. This from the Herald News. The title of this article, Belfry Lights Pull New Crowd Until Police Cover Them Up. It becomes such a problem, they decide they have to do something to get people to not show up. The largest crowd in 3 nights came for a look at the strange flickering lights in a church steeple here last night. A milling crowd of about 3,000 persons gathered around the church. Police finally draped a tarpaulin around the steeple to disperse the onlookers. I guess that's the word that basically means like tarp. It's just, you know, a waterproof cloth of some kind. I had to look it up because I haven't heard that term used before, tarpaulin. But I guess it used to be made of actual tar. That's where the tar part comes. But nowadays, I think we just refer to them as tarps. And there was still no agreement on what caused the strange lights. Now, that's another thing to think about. You got 5,000 people coming out here. I'm sure some of them, are taking it as a religious occurrence, and they're not going to question it too strongly. But you've got people also in that neighborhood. There are neighbors complaining about the damage to their roof because kids are trying to get up on their roof to see these eyes, and they're like, you know, poking holes in their roofing material. So you've got all kinds of people that are around this area. I'm sure you have people that are trying to be critical and really try to figure out, outside of the parish priest, trying to figure out what this is. When you see a light source like that, I mean, if you were actually there to catch it, even if you couldn't get into the steeple necessarily, I mean, I would just be circling that block, looking and trying to figure out, okay, where is that beam coming from? What else could this be? I have to assume people were doing that, and we're not getting any really clear explanation on this. We just have the parish priest that keeps saying, it's traffic lights, it's traffic lights. You know, we've got reporters out there. We've got multiple publications, multiple newspapers writing about this. Unless everyone is just on the same tip of like, hey, don't spoil it. You know, we're selling papers with this. You know, it's not even a headline. It's not like it's the front page. I don't know. A parish priest has denied the lights come from supernatural causes, saying merely they're a reflection of colors from a corner traffic light. But that doesn't discourage the crowd. They walked all around St. Joseph's RC Church. See, once again, I'd be in that crowd. I'd be walking around that thing trying to figure out what's happening, where those lights are coming from. The Courier News writes about it again on May 18th, 1954. Large, whitish. So the explanation of like the type of light coming through seems to move around a little bit. Pale yellow, amber, pink, whitish. But this is information coming from a newsman. Can we trust that a little more? I don't know. A newsman on the scene said the lights on previous nights seemed to change colors at the same time as the corner traffic signal, but reported that was not the case last night, when the light was whitish instead of orange, yellow, and pale green. Interestingly, here we get the first mention of green, but we also get this story, unnamed newsman, unfortunately, legit news source that it's being written in, but the guy, we don't know who this is, says that, hey, no, I was checking it out before. It did look like traffic lights, but last night was different because it was just whitish. And now we get green injected as one of the colors, which was in none of the previous explanations. So it sounds to me, if we're trying to put like a timeline together on this, they find Guarino's body on Friday, probably hits the news Saturday morning. Saturday evening, 800 people come out. Sunday night, 1,000 people come out. And then according to that other article we read, on the third night, 3,000 people come out. So that would have been Monday night to see this. Still not quite the 20,000 mentioned in that previous article, but I don't know if they're just trying to sum up, the total of people that have been coming out to see it over the course of the whole month, because we know this is about a month later from when the boys noticed it back on Good Friday. The steeple is square and is topped by a slate pyramid. 3 recessed windows are on each side of its base. This article coming from The Record, written on the 18th of May also. Most of the viewers last night were children, some armed with spotlights, telescopes, and binoculars. Some of the residents nearby were talking of an apparition or a miracle, but a priest who asked that his name not be used, again, said, "There's nothing to it. I wish there was." I don't know, but we do get the name of a pastor here. I don't know if this is the same one that's been commenting the whole time. Based on the tone of things that I've seen him say, I think it might be the same person. But here at the Herald News, the lights can only be seen on the south side, appearing to center in the windows there. That's where the police draped the tarpaulin last night, around the window panes, metal facings, and a rain gutter. They took the action after a detail of a dozen patrolmen had a difficult time keeping the crowds in hand and getting traffic moving through the narrow streets by the scene. The pastor, Reverend Francis J. Sexton, not to be confused with the Sexton that was working there, but this is a pastor actually named Reverend Sexton, has been besieged by telephone calls and visitors for the past few days. He drove away to an unannounced location to get some rest yesterday. So this seems to be a real pain, not just for the neighborhood, but the people actually working at this church too. They kind of get tired of dealing with this really, really quickly. That's it for the official articles I was able to find. I did find this other write-up at destinationaustinfamily.blogspot.com. Seems to be just a little personal blog. We have the author here saying, "I decided to scan some of my mother's childhood letters. Enclosed in the envelope were several newspaper clippings about a phenomenon known as the Eyes of St. Joseph's. My mother's family belonged to the parish at St. Joseph's, and below is a full transcription of the news clippings." I just want to take this with a little grain of salt because we don't know the original source. Even at the bottom, he's like, "I'm trying to figure out where these came from," but they were clippings. They don't have the name. Like, it's this type of thing. You get a clipping of the story. You don't actually have the publication name, the date of publication. All that stuff has been taken off of it. So little of a bit of a grain of salt. Most of the information seems to line up with the other information that I've been reviewing on this. Few small changes, but one big thing that actually, for me, I think tells me this is legit. So into the article. Crowds watching the nightly mystery lights increased last night after the body of the church sexton was found in a seat of the choir loft. Matthew Guarino, 64, had said Thursday morning he was going up to the belfry to investigate the strange lights that have been seen glowing in the church bell tower since Good Friday. 2 other church workers, Paul DiGiacomo, 17 years old, and Patrick Halton, climbed to the belfry and after a search found him dead. A medical center doctor said death was caused by a heart attack. The nice woman that came by my table at CrimeCon and spoke to me specifically mentioned Paul DiGiacomo, and I can't remember if it was a relative of hers or someone she knew, but that's who she heard the story from, if I recall correctly. So to see that name kind of pop up in this story where I'm not seeing it come up in any other sources, I think that these clippings are legit. Hundreds assembled at various points around the church. The throng stood for hours watching the lights that were plainly visible. Many carried binoculars and had a few telescopes. It was evident that the lights were not being shined on the bell tower from any outside source. That's pretty telling. But if you have a bunch of people that are out there and they're walking around the block trying to figure it out, I think it would be pretty quick and easy to determine if there was an obvious source that was hitting that bell tower. And for just the intensity of the light that we're seeing in the admittedly bad photos we've seen so far, it's got to be a serious light source. Like this whole thought that, oh, it's just kind of ambient light from the traffic lights. I don't know, based on the photos we've seen so far. No rays that would immediately be discernible if a spotlight was being used were visible at all. The lights were seen emanating from the inside of the belfry, somewhere illuminating 2 round windows at the base of the steeple. The lights were noticed glowing brightly for a brief period and then fading away, almost disappearing, only to reappear and glow steadily for 10 to 20 minute intervals. So a little tweak on the timing there, but still substantial time intervals that I think aren't supporting the traffic light theory. The light at times would become almost white. Then it would seem to change color and glow with an amber shade that would turn almost to pink and then back again to a dull yellow. So here we're getting the same explanation we had heard before, but we're not getting any mention of green. Tom Richmond, 20 years old, a member of St. Joseph's Parish, has his answer to the mystery. My theory is that the glow is produced by the traffic lights on the northeast corner of Pavonia and Baldwin Avenues. He distinctly saw the glow change from red to amber to green as the traffic light changed to those colors. So that is kind of almost a copy of the story we heard from the newsman, but then the newsman insists that the next day he was there, it wasn't doing that. It wasn't that same light source. And that kind of makes me think back to when I was mentioning maybe we're looking at multiple sources here. Like if there's something up there that's reflective enough that it's going to pick up whatever's happening on the street around it, one day maybe it's going to be, I don't know, car headlights that are coming down the road. Maybe the next day it's going to be the traffic lights that it's picking up, or some business nearby that has some kind of significant lighting. That's kind of where I'm leaning. Is just it feels like there might be multiple sources, because even the explanations we're seeing some variation in them. But veteran police officers said they don't remember, this is a really big point, they don't remember that there was a traffic light at that corner some 30 years ago when the mystery lights were previously seen. Keep in mind, this, yes, it kind of renewed in the mid-50s, but they had been seeing it since back in 1920. And there's a couple of clips here where these are news articles back from 1920 when they were writing about that. And they even tried the same thing of using a curtain, but in this instance, they were trying to use a curtain to block whatever the light source was and see if they could stop the light from coming through. So they would use the curtain, but they would only block 2 windows at a time. And they were kind of moving it around, trying to figure out what direction this light source was coming from. According to the historian / storyteller, they were never able to block the light. They put up that curtain, they would cover up 2 windows, the eyes would still show up. They'd move it, they'd cover up another 2 windows, the eyes would still show up. So in the 1950s, when they covered up the window, they covered up the windows where the eyes would actually show. That was their way of trying to handle it at that point. This clipping from a newspaper that we don't know also seems to confirm the information about Mr. Guarino. It talks about his funeral arrangements. It actually has details like the place, the time, and then some additional information. The tower itself is practically bare, except for the bell in the belfry and an assortment of pigeons' nests. There are no electronic signs in the tower, or lights in the tower. The only electricity in that part of the church is the connection to the bell, which is electrically operated. I do believe there's also, it looks like there's some type of speaker system up there. I think there's a speaker kind of pushing off in every direction. I would assume that that's electrically operated as well. And I don't know if that's new. That might be newer than this occurrence. A few children have declared that they've seen the lights during the daytime, but most of the observers have watched the reflections after dark. That's one of the biggest things that I've been looking for in all this, because if you're seeing those lights in the daytime, you've got a huge, significant source of light. You've got the sun, and the direction that they're talking about might be supported when you see where the sun is, especially in afternoon hours there. But they're saying that they're seeing this at night. Viewers have not been able to see the reflections unless they were at least a half block from the steeple. Based just on kind of virtually walking around it with Google Earth, as soon as you get within a block, you can't see the windows. So I was, it would actually be helpful if you could see the windows, because that would give you a better sense maybe of like the angle for how that light's bouncing in, or maybe give you some other hint as to what's happening there, but you can't even see the windows. An aide to Father Sexton pointed out that none of the priests now at St. Joseph's have been in the belfry for at least 5 years. Aside from the current visits of the police, painters were the last ones to have been in that part of the church, which is kept locked, the aide said. One of the things that historian/storyteller Bob Leach touches on is, it was repainted. And one of the theories that police came up with is perhaps the ceiling that's in the belfry there had been painted with some type of hyper-reflective paint. He even says like a metal-based paint or something of that nature. It is interesting to know that painters were the last ones to be up there. And, then you have these occurrences start. There might be something to that. It might be a component. Maybe there's other reflectiveness that happens up there. Maybe it's the sole source. But let's continue with the information that I was able to dig up here. Over at weirdnj.com. Do these occurrences still happen, or at least have there been more recent ones? They do have some information that was sent in from someone named Matthew F. Amato Jr. here. In 1991, when I was a senior news columnist, I was sent out on an assignment with our photographer to view the St. Joseph's Cat's Eyes. On February 27th, 1991, standing on the northwest corner of Baldwin and Newark Avenue in front of the luncheonette, right across from the Brennan-Hudson County Courthouse, I saw the eyes again. That night, I did all I could to check and see if the eyes were a reflection of lights from the courthouse or anywhere else. I could find no possible reflection from anywhere. In 1954, because of the crowds, officials took the time out to put a tarpaulin cover over the belfry windows to dissipate the crowd of viewers. The idea worked, but something else happened. The local newspaper took a picture of the tarpaulin, and many people noted that from the photograph on the front page and the way the tarpaulin folded in hanging fashion, it resembled the face of the devil. I haven't been able to find that photo. I wish I could find that photo to take a look at it, but unfortunately we don't have it. Another bit of information here. I'm a Jersey City police officer. The cat eyes in the Tower of St. Joseph steeple can be seen nightly. They are a regular occurrence. What makes this phenomena ironic is that St. Joseph's Church runs a school for the blind. Unfortunately, this officer just refers to himself as Chuck. Once again, these sources could be seen as a little questionable, but doesn't seem out of the realm of the discussion that we've been having here so far. So I'm not going to necessarily discount that stuff. But once again, they're back on the corner of Newark and Baldwin. So let's dig in, and my hat's off to this man in this photo here, Bob Leach. Historian Bob Leach's documentary of Strange Light in Church's Belfry to show at Jersey City Library. My hat's off to this guy, because he's a great storyteller. He really is. And even, I'm not going to go through this whole article, but he touches in this article about there's an important component between being factually correct or factually accurate, but then also being a good storyteller and kind of injecting some personality into it. There is a YouTube video of him. It's actually, I think it is this documentary. It's like a 25-minute YouTube video at this point. Of course, I'll have a link to it down below. If you have a little extra time after you're done watching this, please watch it. I'm pretty sure you're going to be entertained by the way he lays all this out. But on top of that, facts are important. And he actually does a little footwork to try to understand this. But like I mentioned before, he takes it right to the edge. He gives you all the pieces of information leading just short of a conclusion, and then he just leaves it. Kind of like any great storyteller would, right? Jersey City storyteller Bob Leach tackles this inexplicable event in his video documentary, Eyes of St. Joseph. I've been telling the story ever since I first heard it from my mother, who saw the strange lights in 1921. I was in high school when the lights reappeared in 1954 on Good Friday and the sexton died in the belfry. Since it's a true story, I went by day-to-day newspaper accounts as well as oral histories and my own memories. The story takes place in a local Catholic parish during the Cold War. It's an era that we all prayed for a miracle. Many hoped the lights were a sign. So what other important things come out in his version of this? First of all, he actually digs up a picture of Sexton Matt Guarino. So certainly confirmed. I mean, if we didn't already confirm it from all the different news print, yes, this was a real person that lost his life. Thinking about what happened around here, he's 64 years old. He's going up into a tower that is, it's significant. Like, I mean, just take a look at it from the ground here. I mean, it's hard to tell because the size of the windows, like some of these windows look like they're 2 stories or could be nearly 2 stories tall. Imagine the trek to get all the way up here. That's a bit of work. And for a 64-year-old man, part of it is literally ladders. And apparently there's parts of it where it's like wood slats. We're going to watch a little bit of the video where we get a full description of how you get up there. It sounds like it was just a very unfortunate accident that he decided to go up there and to try to figure things out that Thursday and had a heart attack while he was up there. On top of that, this photo, and I wish, unfortunately, Mr. Leach did not give a source for what this photo is, but it is so close. If we take a look back at Weird New Jersey, this is the photo that they posted. I don't think they really gave a source on this one either. Yeah, we got no source on this photo either, but you can see, I mean, it's obviously an older photo. What I love about these 2 photos is the angle is perfect. Like if you look, I mean, look at how much sunlight is coming through on this side here. I mean, it's like the exact same shape. So it's almost like these 2 photographers were standing in the exact same, at least at the same angle, years apart from each other. Even the shape of the eyes, like, do you ever see how this one is a little bit higher than this one? This one kind of drops lower. It's not quite as noticeable here. This one, but it is. It's just a touch higher than this one over here. But there's something, when I first found these photos, that really stuck out to me, and that's that orb that's below the eye. This guy right here. It is so clear to me that this is part of the same architecture. Look at this window. It's got orbs cut out. Somehow, light is bouncing into this area and is being reflected because it's upside down. The orbs are on the wrong place. And the shape of this, it's basically, it looks like it's the windows on the other side. Like there's some kind of light source that is coming through there. It's got to be bouncing off the floor, at least for this particular photo. But honestly, the shape of it here is exactly the same. I mean, what you're seeing lit up is a section of the roof, right? Because you're standing below this, you're a block away, you're looking at this. If you were the same level, which actually, if we take a look back at the high school video, they have some classrooms that are pretty close to the same height.
The State Avenue side.
And check this out. Once this thing goes into focus, I mean, if you're even close to the same height, you can look all the way through. That's definitely not what the people were seeing from down on the street level. So what you're seeing in the whatever is being lit up is you're seeing the roof lit up, and you're seeing it lit up in the shape of the windows, but somehow flipped upside down. What that's leading me to believe is there's something reflective on the floor, and somehow there's a strong light source hitting the other side, coming through those windows, reflecting off that, and then lighting up the dark interior of the roof. Now, for this particular photo, like, I don't I wish I knew the source of this, but this is obviously during the day. What significant source of light could you have that could be hitting the whole side that wouldn't be obvious? Because that'd be the other thing, right? If you were standing on the other side of it and someone was shining a spotlight, you'd be able to see, oh, there's a spotlight that's hitting the windows because you could see the rest of the outline. What light would be not obvious on the other side? It would be the sun. It would absolutely be the sun. And if we look, this is coming from the same direction, that same corner where people were claiming to have seen it. If we head in this direction, like look at the shadows, look at the direction that they're in. The sun is on the other side of the church, and look at the angle. It even looks like it explains why only 2 of the windows are lighting up. If the sun is back over here, coming down, bouncing off something. Honestly, the 3rd window might be in there in terms of light, but it's going to be over here. If the occurrences were all during the day, I would say solved. It's solved. Well, outside of understanding what's on the ground in there that's so reflective, because it's holding the shape like perfectly. I mean, that's a really... It would almost have to like be a mirror, something down there that is just bouncing that light, completely holding the shape of these windows and then reflecting it right onto the roof. The other possibility is, yes, it's matching the type of architecture, but maybe there's some other item in there that has that same style and there's some light that's kind of being lit through that. Like if there was these same types of windows for some reason built into the floor here, and then you had a chandelier or something below that, you know, that could bounce up, go through those windows, and then cause that type of reflection up there. Is there holes in this floor? Are we going to be able to answer that question? Let's keep going. But yeah, I mean, I'm telling you, for a daytime occurrence of this, if we can figure out the reflective spot, or if there's something else going on with the floor, I would say that we've got this solved. For nighttime occurrences, I have no idea. Because now think about that possibility. If we take that same theory, there's something reflective on the floor. How is that going to work if the light source is down at street level? Like, this is a power pole here, so it'd be even lower than that. You've got traffic lights somewhere down here that are somehow reflecting off something in the floor in here. There's no way. It would have to be a light source that was very strong and more than likely higher than the windows coming in through them. So how do you get that to happen at night? Moonlight? Maybe that's why it only happened at kind of specific times. I don't know. But one other thing that he does that's really, really good in this video, apparently he takes a student and they get access to the church. So we finally get some images from inside. This is the first doorway they have to go through to try to access the belfry. They get into an organ room. And by the way, look at the color of these lights in here and in this photo. Like, you've just got orange, warm, glowing orange light because you've got all this natural wood. And here you also have, you know, these giant brass pipes. The colors that are being described for coming out through the belfry could certainly be generated from inside here. Architecture, way more complex in here, like not quite as simple as those shapes out on the belfry. So having some type of repeat of the belfry shape, like down in this level, doesn't seem right necessarily. But from this room, there's a secret compartment in one of these walls, essentially, that you have to open. And that leads you on the way up. Let's go ahead and watch this together and just see how you get up there. And then we'll talk about what you see when you do get up there.
Our student enters the organ just as Mac Guarino would have done years before. He slides past the internal mechanisms of the organ. Mac Guarino would have emerged in a shaft on the other side of the wall behind the organ. If he looked up, he would have seen an illuminated cross on the ceiling. That cross is an illusion. It's not there. And as you climb closer to the cross, it disappears. The next step in the sexton's journey years ago was a carpenter's ladder. We imagine him climbing hand over hand up the carpenter's ladder until he comes to a ledge. Beyond the ledge, the sexton has to climb a makeshift ladder, nothing more than slats nailed to a wall. We envision him climbing hand over foot, up the makeshift ladder until he comes to another ledge. We imagine he rests here because the climb is a great exertion on a man the church sexton's age. He arrives at yet another ledge which holds a short ladder. Here our student pushes open the trapdoor leading to the belfry, just as the sexton would have done years ago. He enters the bell tower. Our students in the bell tower looks like Frankenstein's laboratory, but the journey is not yet over. There are 2 more staircases to be climbed to yet another trapdoor. We envision Mac going up 2 more flights to push open yet another trapdoor and climb into the open-air balcony where the mysterious lights emanate.
So I think we can certainly say, after seeing that especially, that was a serious amount of strain on someone's heart, a man of that age. I don't think there's anything hard to understand about that occurrence. It's unfortunate. It's very, very, it's really tragic that something like this, something where people were rallying around it, looking at it as potentially like a religious experience, was the catalyst for him having to go up there and check things out. And unfortunately, he loses his life on the way. But they do go up there. The student does go up there, and they do take some photos while they're up there. And when I saw this photo, already thinking about the possibility of there's got to be something reflective on the floor, my brain just lit right up as soon as I saw this. There is some type of leaking issue in this belfry where water collects here. And it might just be that when it rains, because you can see the design, it looks like the windows are a little recessed from the lower part where I said it was kind of notched out. It looks like there's a gap there of a few feet. So any rain that's hitting this is basically pouring off right onto this floor. And what you're getting there is pools of water that are highly reflective. Look at this. The shape that we're looking for, here it is. It's in the reflection on the ground. The only problem is if you believe that these occurrences were actually seen at night, what light source is going to light that up? Now, we did mention that they did repaint it, and you can see in this photo also that the ceiling is pretty reflective, but I don't think that's it, because you can see it, as reflective as it is just obliterating the shape. I mean, at this point, it almost looks like the top of a cat's head or something with 2 little ears. The circles are kind of fuzzed to the point that they're joining the larger circle. I don't think that's as clean. Like, this is super, super clean in both of these. That extra circle is really, really clean. So the idea that it's reflecting off of the roof and then off the water in some way, after going through 2 reflections and having one of them muddled up like this, I don't see that as a possibility. But that would also explain why only certain times of the year you would be seeing this. Because if it had rained before, there was enough water in there, built up enough to get this reflective surface on the floor, and then you had a light source. I'm still pretty convinced it would have to be coming from above. And then even that 10 to 20 minute window, like if you think about the sun being in position and then moving out to the point where you wouldn't be able to see it anymore, does that kind of make sense? Like you would see it kind of in the right spot for about 20 minutes and then it would move out to a spot where you couldn't see it anymore. Also, the way the floor is getting wet in here, only a section of it is wet. Could that explain why only 2 of the windows are being seen or be a part of it? Because I'm still of the mind that there could be the 3rd window, but it's over here in the corner. You're just not seeing it because it's hitting the wall up over here. But it doesn't explain nighttime it just doesn't explain nighttime, and I don't know how to. I don't know. Unless these occurrences all happened like even dusk, like the sun couldn't be that low. It would have to be like late afternoon, like mid-afternoon to late afternoon hours, I think, for these sightings. Or is it back to what I was saying before? There's multiple different sources for this. People are seeing different types of reflections, different light sources that are bouncing around up there in different ways at different times. Possibly. I don't know. I think I'll be scratching my head about this one for a bit. What about you guys? I want to hear your theories about this in the comments down below. Before I end today's video, I want to thank several new supporters on Patreon. Thank you guys so much for giving us this platform, allowing us to be here, sharing these stories with you, looking into things a little bit different today, but we really appreciate you. Thank you, Lorraine Visco. Thank you, Tansa Silva, and thank you, Nathan Smith, for joining on Patreon. If you want to support the channel, please visit lordandarts.com. There you can sign up for Patreon, sign up for PayPal, buy merchandise, or even buy us a coffee like Fred Crook recently did. I hope you guys enjoyed this little change of pace for Brain Scratch. We only do this once or twice a year. I just had the itch, and that story that she told me at CrimeCon was so compelling. I had to go down this rabbit hole. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Please join us again on Monday for a brand new episode of Case Cracked right here on the Lord and Arts channel.